Hey there, and thanks again for listening to another episode of the Impulsive Thinker podcast for the high achieving ADHD entrepreneur. Today's episode is brought to you by CADAC, the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada. You can get more information at www.caddac.ca, cadac.ca. Today, I have a guest from ADHD Inside Out, Dan Duncan. He is an ADHD coach, a consultant, and an academic strategist. And I first met him at the 13th annual CADAC ADHD conference, where he was discussing the ADHD Inside Out framework. And I thought immediately, this is something you, the listener, need to listen to and understand and hear. And of course, I could have regurgitated all that stuff, but I think it was better to bring Dan on. And here I have Dan Duncan. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. How are you, Andre?
Very excited because I really liked how you presented this information, and I got a lot more clarity on my side, and I thought definitely needed to discuss it with here. But before we start, let's give it a little bit of background of yourself and how you created ADHD Inside Out.
All right. Well, first of all, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 38, so 20 years ago-ish. I have a son who has ADHD and one without. So we had that contrast as parents, understanding that. About a little over a decade ago, I started looking into coaching and specifically ADHD coaching, pursued that. And now that's all I do is work with people who have ADHD. So I work with UBCO students, University of British Columbia, Okanagan campus, several school districts, helping them understand ADHD.
Excellent.
And mostly it's private practice, though, work with individuals.
That's good. And especially your work with the students, you're giving them a lot of opportunities to see it as a strength and not a hindrance. It's got challenges, but there's ways we can work around it, and everyone's ADHD is unique.
Yeah. So
what's this ADHD Inside Out framework that you keep talking about?
Well, probably the best way to explain it is in contrast with, instead of the inside out, the outside in perspective most people have. Most people, when we're encountering and learning about ADHD and even trying to respond to it properly, we focus on the outside. We focus on the symptoms. And when we do that, our whole goal is, I need to reduce that person's distractibility, or they need to be less impulsive or less forgetful. So we're focused on the outside, and that always gets us on the wrong path. That always leads to the conclusion that these symptoms are really just bad character and poor choices. This person needs to try harder, right?
Oh, so that thinking that was more of an attack on the person, on their moral due. Okay, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
It always ends up that people personify our symptoms as though that's us. That's who you are, and that's so off base. And so that carries a lot of shame and blame over time. But so the inside out perspective helps us stay away from that trap. As soon as we see some type of ADHD behavior or symptom, our automatic thought should go inside the brain, what we know about ADHD. And ADHD in its most basic understanding is low motivation. We do not produce motivation as easily as other brain styles. And so that's where we need to skip to automatically.
So motivation, can you just want to expand on the motivation part? Because I've talked to even my psychiatrist. I said, I got ADHD, so I got low motivation, I got blah, blah. And he's like, no, motivation has nothing to do with that. So what's your definition of motivation in this context?
Yeah, well, when you look at what the medication's trying to do, it's literally boosting your ability to process dopamine and norepinephrine. And dopamine is that pleasure reward neurotransmitter, right? So it lets you feel interest. And norepinephrine is a stressor. It lets you become alert. And so when we have situations that come our way, they're either opportunities, which we perceive added value from, right? And the higher the value we perceive, the more interest we feel. Our brain gives us free energy to support the pursuit of that opportunity.
As long as it's interesting.
And literally for everyone, the more interesting, the more motivated.
Right.
It's a natural free response your brain gives you. Tasks and threats are on the other side of the equation. Your brain interprets a task like a threat. In other words, I need to do that so I don't lose value. Like there's a consequence if I don't do it. So it feels like a threat. And so your brain produces norepinephrine to let you feel stress to take care of that threat, right?
Yeah.
So literally motivation's interest or stress, dopamine, norepinephrine. And so because the medication targets that, that's where we start with, even in coaching models. We can't reach in the brain and squeeze out more dopamine for someone, but we can start to alter the scenario so that it provides more free energy by adding interest or stress to the situation. So that's kind of half of the strategy, is looking at, this is a low motivation problem. The second thing that leads to is there's another type of mental energy called determination. Determination is not free energy. Determination is when you have to make yourself do something because you don't feel motivated to do it for free, right? Everyone understands that. And determination is like, it's like that rechargeable battery. Every day you wake up, your brain has restored some mental energy for you to spend over the day.
Yeah.
Well, with ADHD, actually with everyone's brain, our executive functions are relying on how much mental energy they're being given. They function on mental energy. And so their ADHD symptoms are nothing more than executive function failures, right? We're forgetful, we're inattentive, we're impulsive. Those are executive functions failing us. And the reason they fail is because they're not getting enough energy to perform and supporting our decision, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, the biggest thing I did learn, my big epiphany when I was researching after my diagnosis a few years ago, was it's an executive function deficit. And how can I manage that? And I think also, I think this is a big key. And I like how you tie it between the motivation, determination, and especially the mental energy aspect.
Right. Yes, because it's the mental energy that is actually fueling your executive functions. So when your executive functions fail, we need to look below that and find, how can we manage your mental energy better so that your executive functions don't fail as often or as dramatically, right?
Yeah.
And so you're literally only working with those two levers: motivation, which is interest or stress. Can we add interest or stress to the situation? Your brain will give you a little bit more free energy to execute it. The other half is, can we change the way you do things to fit your ADHD brain style, so you don't have to spend as much determination making yourself do it the usual way, right?
Let's use more of the free stuff and less of the self-sufficient, like what did you call it? The expensive stuff. That's a good one saying it. Yeah, the not free energy, and try to find that balance. Like one way, the other thing I'm also hearing, Dan, is we need to use our determination throughout the day. But is it, how efficient can we use it to max productivity or whatnot? Or is it fair to say, if I'm doing something I really don't like I always said, it takes a lot of focus to focus on something I don't like.
Yeah.
That be burning up a lot of determination, mental energy?
Absolutely. So comparing it to other brain styles, let's just generically say some situation you're addressing, it's a level 8 out of 10. That's how much value it feels. That's pretty high value, right? A non-ADHD brain will produce 8 units of motivation to support that 8 units of value that's at stake.
Yeah.
So to get to 10 units of energy, that person only has to add a couple units of determination. So they actually just have to work a little bit extra above their motivation. And their executive functions are getting like 10 out of 10 energy. They're getting all the energy they need, right? Well, with ADHD, in the equivalent scenario, we get a situation that's an 8 out of 10 because we don't process dopamine and norepinephrine, because we don't feel motivation as easily. It's just as valuable. It's an 8 out of 10, but we might be only getting 3 units of motivation to support that decision.
Right.
So we have to spend 7 units of determination. And we're tapping into that battery stored energy at a much higher rate. So our executive functions will not last as long. We'll run out of energy sooner.
So then would that also explain that sometimes when I go home at night, my brain is just fried. I can't think anymore. I don't even know you know, do I use a fork or a spoon? Something so simple is so hard. I don't want to make that decision.
Exactly.
Okay.
Your executive functions don't have enough energy to operate well. And
And
so it can look like a skill deficit, right? Oh, this person, you know, doesn't
from the
have that
outside,
skill.
from the
From the outside,
outside, it's a
exactly.
deficit.
From the inside is just it's energy equation difference between ADHD and non-ADHD.
Like, I don't like, I hope the listeners are understanding here. Like, I've mentioned this many, many times. ADHD is one of the few diagnoses you can get that's based on how it affects other people.
Yes.
And like Dan just said, outside. How
Right.
do we make this person less impulsive so it makes us more comfortable and easier?
Right.
But we're never looking on the inside as a mental energy. So, and then the other thing you're also saying too, that it's, we have a finite amount of mental energy every day.
Right.
Finite. It's set.
Yep.
We can't regain it. Sleep, rest, brain breaks, turn your brain off.
Having fun restores some of that battery.
What fun? What are you talking about?
Fun is the protein for the ADHD person, right?
And not in the fun as an entrepreneur, having fun doing your work and your stuff. You mean leisurely self-care stuff that you would truly enjoy and
anything you actually enjoy replenishes some of that determination storage, right?
Yeah. And then just also, let's remember too, what Dan also said was interest or stress.
Yep.
Everyone has a perception that we want more dopamine. It has to do with interest, but actually the stress will also kick that up through the fancy words of neoepinephrine. But one way or the other, it gets our brain going, even if there's stress.
Yes, but it has to be external stress. And that's a key ingredient.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
We ADHD brains, we are not internally responsive. So here, this becomes the problem. My brain isn't giving me enough motivation. So anxiety is the natural response where our brain tries to give us more stress.
Right.
Right. But we don't respond to internal stress very well. So anxiety doesn't work for us. So we increase it. ADHD people are 17 times more likely to reach clinical levels of anxiety because our brain's actually trying to respond to motivate us through stress, and it can't work. But we are very responsive to external stressors.
So we're not good at listening to our own brain.
No, we are externally responsive. So we should bait our brain into finding interest and stress outside. So
you just gave me an idea of something else. I'll write it out. You keep going. Sorry.
Okay. So typical example, let's say, and this is a real story. One of my clients, he said, I've spent thousands of dollars on gym memberships because I want to be fit, but I never go. Right. So I said, okay, well, half of an equation is how to add interest or stress if we can. Is there any way we can find to add interest or stress to this scenario? And over time, he came up with an idea. He said, well, I have a friend who goes to the gym Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Well, actually, I said, do you have a friend who goes to the gym? And he said, yeah, I tried that. I tried meeting him at the gym, but I just don't show up. I said, okay, what if you promised to be his ride Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Now he's actually relying on you. And that, for him, that worked because that was enough external stress. He didn't want to disappoint his friend, right? Had nothing to do with shaming himself and, act like a man, do what you're going to say, get to the gym. It was literally, he planted an external obligation that his brain gave him. And I don't want to disappoint my friend. That's what got him to the gym. He added stress to the
certain accountability.
Yeah.
Responsible accountability.
Right.
So now that you framed it in that way, to me, I've always I got an engineering company and I'm developing tactical breakthroughs, but I really like construction sites when problems go wrong, but that's all external stress.
Right.
I can really get a lot of work done as long as my clients are putting stress on me to get the stuff done, and that works well. But all my internal strategic projects are going nowhere. And I think you just connected the dots for me there because I'm the one that's pushing me.
Yes.
I'm the one that's delaying it. And you're right, the anxiety, like you said that 17% of the ADHD people have clinical levels of anxiety.
No, we're 17 times more likely
17 times more time. And I guarantee our anxiety levels are high and in comparison to everyone else.
Yeah.
And we should look at that personally, internally. And like you said, external stress, anxiety helps us perform, but our internal anxiety, actually, that's where we can fall into problems because it's inside our head.
Right. And so everything about ADHD strategies is externalizing, right?
It should be, now that what I'm hearing about it.
Should be. Yeah.
And
Because
then there's a lot of people not doing that. Yeah.
because you're very responsive to the external world. Your brain is wired to be reactive and responsive, but not self-driven. Right?
Okay, so what I do, okay, this is good. You just connected me another dot. I read somewhere that an ADHD person can't talk to themselves inside their head. They need to talk out loud so they themselves. It's got to go out to in, not stay in.
Yep.
And if we're talking about this thing that this internal stuff response is poor, that makes sense to me. Why, if I'm just talking to myself inside my head,
Right.
it's not working. I need to talk it out loud, even if I'm talking to the wall. It's the point that it goes, comes out of my mouth into my ears, a whole different direction and process.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why you'll see often ADHD people, verbal processor ADHD people, if they're really trying to focus, their lips are moving. They might not be talking out loud, but they're literally creating it feels like I think it inside, I say it outside, so it sinks in again better inside, right? Like this cycle.
Yeah, I do that with complex problems or something. I'll talk it out loud and mumble it out. And if it's really complicated, actually my French comes out, I have to switch. And it's kind of interesting how some problems, no problem in English, but sometimes in French. I think that's tremendous. I think that's a huge thing for the listener to take from here, is this external and internal. And we shine when there's external stress. That's just completely, I knew about it, but now it's concrete now. I get that. And then we're not internally responsive.
No. And there's a little bit of a push always in our society. You need to be more independent, which means you need to manage things in your head better. That's a trap for ADHD. Don't even think about doing that.
Oh, you don't want to be in my head, man.
No, mine neither, actually. So here's what happens. Let's say a teenager, especially, oh, mom's mothering me like she's a helicopter parent, right? So we become overly independent. It's like, I don't want anyone to help monitor and manage me. So we become inside our head and I'm going to be my own person. I'm going to manage myself. Don't. Why would you do that? You're wired to be externally responsive. So we should invite or even plant people to say, listen, if my alarm goes off and you don't see me stand up and walk to the car, could you tell me your alarm went off? Like, I invite external sources.
Right. Yeah.
I don't reject them as though I need babysitting. I'm actually managing myself autonomously, going, oh, I respond better to the external world. So I'll plant everything as much as I can outside my head, not inside.
Everyone's helping me be better.
Yeah. And if they're willing to, then I invite that. I can't demand that they do it.
Well, one thing I always do, I see someone say, I want to meet up, or we need to schedule something together. I'm like, can you email that to me right now?
Yeah.
Email it to me. Now it's a reminder. It's external.
That's
right.
right.
Like, why? That's silly. Just remember it. No, it'll forget by the time I went out this door. I no longer hide that stuff. Just email me, send me that reminder. I actually email myself little reminders of things I need to do.
Yeah. No, me too. Everything goes in my phone calendar. Like my wife might say, so what are you doing tomorrow? I have no idea. I don't want to know, but I know where to find it if I do want to.
Exactly. Right? Mental energy efficiency.
Yep. Stay in the moment. Our brains are wired for right now, right here. So manage your life to maximize that. It's the superpower or the kryptonite. And ADHD is very situational. We're either overperforming or underperforming.
It's either in or either out. That's I'm either in or completely out. Zero miles an hour, 150.
I can't focus, or you can't break my focus, right?
Yeah.
I'm cool as a cucumber, or as I'm a raging lunatic. It just depends on whether the switch of energy has gone on or off.
Right. Wow, this is fantastic. I know the listeners got a huge thing out of this. And how did you, like, is this something you just thought about? Like, how did you, this is quite the framework.
Honestly, I don't know how I find things. Like most people with ADHD, we wander our way to success, and it's like, hey, this made sense when I said it, almost, So this framework is really, it's concise. It's come together. It's like easy to replicate and easy to build off of. But I don't know how I reached it. I didn't plan my way to it, if I can put it that way. It just made sense.
And that's the thing. We get there a lot quicker if we just make sense of it. And then, and it just comes out of nowhere, which is fantastic. And that's also, I was really happy you came up with that answer, because that's what I want the listeners to hear. We don't need justification or a big, long mathematical proof of how we came up with it. It just, we thought about it. It made sense. And for you, it's working with your clients.
Yeah.
It got you on this podcast because of what it is. So we know it's, it's correct if you're getting feedback, external feedback.
External feedback. Yep.
So fantastic. So again, three things that you got to take from this call. This inside in perspective.
Inside out. Yeah.
Change on my let me start over.
Yeah.
Let's take the three top things from today's discussion is this inside out perspective.
Yeah.
And that is because if we're concentrating on the symptoms, we're looking from the outside, we're not looking on the inside, which is a motivation thing. So
Yep.
I'm going into point 2 here.
Yep.
ADHD brains have low motivations. That's just the way the brain's wired, the way it is. But we got to effectively use our mental energy, our finite mental energy efficiently. And by doing that is either it's got to be interesting or stressful. Those are 2 free energy sources.
Yeah.
And then we have determination, which is not free energy, and you have to make it happen. So you have to use mental energy.
Right.
And I love that context. Like if for the listener, you've been listening a lot of time, Colby and mental energy use, like to me, I really love this. Mental energy is finite. Motivation is free stuff you're given for free. You're not using that finite energy, but determination can either suck that energy or use it efficiently.
Right.
And that executive function relies on mental energy. ADHD is an executive function failure on our part. And also mental energy feeds executive function. And how can we get this mental energy is having efficient use as external stress. We shine and thrive on that. And we are not internally responsive with stress or internal, and we just increase our anxiety. Okay, so that's more than 3, but I got to say, this is all great stuff for everyone to rely.
Good.
I might have to, I'll point form them into the show notes so that people can get it, and I'll put it in the newsletter too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, like, again, I listened to your presentation where I moderated for you, and now you made it a lot more clear and it makes a lot more sense to me. And this is exactly what I wanted the listeners to hear.
Perfect.
So I appreciate this, Dan. Where can we find you, or how can we get in touch with you?
Either email is coach@ADHDinsideout.com, or just go to the website ADHDinsideout.com and review that, and there should be a contact form on there.
Yep. Oh, and by the way, your website, you've got a lot of useful resources and blog posts. That's very simple, clarifies stuff. So I recommend you go to his website to learn a bit more. Even if it's the same, you think it's the same thing, there's always a different perspective. And I'll tell you one thing, his perspective is simple, different, and makes a hell of a lot of sense to me.
Good.
So thanks again, Dan, for taking your time out of your busy schedule, joining us. And I thank you, the listener, for listening. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to the podcast, please. And if you found what you heard is beneficial to someone, please share this episode. Please share it with 2 or 3 friends. You can also give me a rating and comments, and I want to hear from you. So please email me at questions@theimpulsivethinker.com or at the website. And thanks again, Dan. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.